there's so many reasons why trusts are created, and it's not just for the wealthy.
Hi there, and welcome to the Trust Exchange podcast series, proudly presented by Norway Savings Asset Management Group. We're going to go around the table and say hello to everyone.
Hi, Norm. I'm Jennifer Cook. I am the head of the Asset Management Group with Norway Savings Bank. I've been with the Asset Management Group for over 20 years and my background is in fiduciary and trust administration.
Excellent.
Hi, Norm. I'm Rachael Billings. I am a senior trust officer and relationship manager here at Norway Savings Asset Management. I have been with the bank for about 2.5 years and have been in banking for just over 20 years. So lots of experience.
It's good to have you both again. Today we're talking about trust powers, which sounds just empowering. Norway Savings Bank has been granted fiduciary powers. And that sounds like it comes directly from Mount Olympus, right? The Greek gods have authorized Norway Savings with a bolt of lightning to install trust powers with you. But in all seriousness, what is trust power?
It is the authority that's been granted to the bank in order to act as a trustee. So we have the ability to be a corporate or institutional trustee in people's estate plans. We can act as successor trustee if there's an existing trustee in place. We can be sort of the plan B if they need it. And we have lots of experience in doing that.
Yeah, so essentially serving as trustee puts us in the driver's seat in terms of managing the trust and making sure that we follow the directions specified in the trust document and ensure that the beneficiary receives what they are entitled to according to the trust terms. So it can sound complicated on the surface, but what we do is we understand each trust document. Every trust is different. So our job as a trustee is to read, understand the document, and then execute those terms. So from our seat, it's not as complicated as it sounds.
Well, we're going to get into the who, what, where, why, and when of this, because I know there can be a lot of underlying, little subtitles for this as well, too. So I guess the obvious question is, why would someone set up a trust?
Well, there's many reasons to set up a trust, and primarily, I think most people end up setting up a trust because they want to control the flow of their money if and when they're no longer able to do so. So whether they have kids or grandkids or a spouse or charities that they feel inclined to give to, as I said, every trust can be structured differently, and they have the control to control that flow of money when they can no longer do that on their own.
I think oftentimes, too, it's meant to protect the interests of the beneficiaries. Sometimes protection for vulnerable people, vulnerable beneficiaries. Maybe there's a surviving spouse who's not accustomed to managing the finances. Maybe there's a beneficiary with some addiction issues, or maybe there's a disability. And so it's really a lot of times it's about protecting the vulnerable beneficiaries that are named in the trust. And I think one of the things, Rachael talked about controlling the flow. There's really a lot of information that goes, or a lot of care that goes into making sure that we're managing those assets and not only distributing income or principal as the trust directs, but also doing things like filing tax returns, managing the assets, making sure that all of the regulations and requirements are met. So there's a lot that goes into that analysis and management of those trust assets.
Are most people even aware of this? Is this like a new thing to them, or are they, I'm not going to say uneducated about this, but just completely not aware that this is being offered by you?
I think a lot of people aren't aware. They think that we do the investment management piece, but we also have this other side of our business that not every institution or financial advisor has the ability to act as trustee. So I do think that this makes us a little bit unique and special in that we have these sort of extra superpowers.
Yeah, you separate yourselves from everybody else because of these superpowers. We talked about this before, but this is not just for wealthy people, right? This is for the everyday person, and you're there to kind of act as a calming factor, as a fiduciary for their best interest. But this is not just for the wealthy, is it?
Correct. A lot of people will establish a trust during their lifetime, and whether they're looking at protecting their assets if and when they might go into an assisted living facility, or they're thinking further down the road to their kids and grandkids. There's so many reasons why trusts are created. And it's not just for the wealthy. You can establish a trust for whatever level of wealth you have.
So what is the process of setting this up? I mean, it's got to be simple.
It's relatively simple, yeah. So we speak with a lot of prospective clients who are just curious about the process, where to get started. While we do serve as trustee, we do not draft up trust documents. So what we often do is we'll refer to our attorneys that we network with, and we're comfortable with these estate planning attorneys that we've vetted and have great relationships with. So we're always happy to put prospective clients in touch with an attorney, and then that attorney will really take a deep dive into what the trust should say. And then once that trust document is drafted up, if they do decide to name Norway Savings as trustee, either now or in the future, essentially what we do is we'll take a look at that trust, make sure it looks, it has everything that we need it to say, and we'll agree to serve as trustee.
I think, too, one of the things that's important for people to remember is that trusts are really flexible. So if we can spend some time talking to that client or that prospective client about how they would like things to go, and then so that client has an idea of what they want when they go sit down with an estate planning attorney. And then there's really so much flexibility written in. I mean, we see all different types of trusts, from, very restrictive trusts that only allow for certain dollar amounts or certain distributions made, to very, very liberal, open trusts, like, give my beneficiary whatever they ask for, basically, and anything in between. So you can really set up a trust that benefits we use kids and grandchildren, but it could be spouse too, for things like medical issues or starting a business or buying a house, those kinds of really basic things. But it can also be education expenses. It can be support and maintenance expenses. But it also can be restrictive enough so that if there's a concern about credit issues, there can be what's called a spendthrift provision put in, so that the assets that are intended for this beneficiary aren't subject to creditors. So there's really a very broad range of expenses or distributions that can be made for a benefit depending on the circumstances of the beneficiary.
So as a fiduciary, you obviously have their best interests. So what is the advantage of working with you as a fiduciary as opposed to anyone else?
Well, I think one of our biggest advantages is that we are a local mutual community bank. We have offices, our primary offices are in Portland, but we travel across our footprint, Maine and New Hampshire. We go to where our clients are or our prospects are. And so I think we really value that personal relationship, the personal touch. We want to get to know people. And I think, when you're doing business with Norway Savings Bank as a trustee or an investment advisor, that you're getting local service. That You're not getting an 800 number that's going to send you to a different location in a different part of the country, and you'll have to talk to somebody and tell somebody new your story all over again. I mean, we have real people answering our phones. We have direct phone numbers that you can reach us. We work very much as a team. We're very collaborative. And so oftentimes we have clients that know, and our entire team, they get to know more than just their client advising team. They get to know the other people on the team. So it's a very warm kind of environment to be in.
To those who might have said, Rachael, well, I missed the boat. I'm too old now. I can't set up a trust. I mean, or I'm too young. I can't do this now. What is your response to that on both cases there?
I don't think there's any perfect age for setting up a trust. You can do it when you're 30. You can do it when you're 80. It's or beyond. It really doesn't matter. What does matter is that if you haven't taken advantage of setting up a trust, and then suddenly you realize that, oh my gosh, what happens when my son or daughter or grandchild inherits a large sum of money, and you realize that perhaps that's irresponsible. So there's no timeline. It's really whenever you feel it's necessary or important to you, go ahead and do it. Like I said, there's estate planning attorneys that this is their specialty, and they will work with any client if they have a need for a trust.
Do you see more and more people coming into Norway Savings Bank setting up trusts now than 5-10 years ago? Is this kind of picking up a little steam, I guess, if you will?
I was thinking that, trusts have obviously been around a really long time, and it used to be that the primary reason for people setting up trusts had to do with taxes, saving on taxes. And now that we have an estate tax exemption amount that is $15 million per person, that's why people think that it's only for the wealthy. But really, over time, it has grown so that it's no longer as much of a tax strategy as it is a disposition and a transfer of wealth strategy. So it's really about protecting those beneficiaries or your loved ones, making sure that they get the assets at the appropriate time in the appropriate manner. So less, I think people are realizing that it's less about a tax issue and more about really how do I transfer this wealth to my loved ones and protect them at the same time.
So in summation, what are some of the advantages we could take away from this podcast here in just like in 30 seconds here?
Again, what Jen had said earlier, we're local. We make decisions locally, and we're approachable. I think that's really the most important thing for clients to know, that when they set up a trust and if their loved ones are working with us down the road, that they're in good hands.
Very good. Thank you, Jen and Rachael, and thanks for joining us for this Trust Exchange podcast series brought to you by Norway Savings Asset Management Group, AMG. We thank you for joining us in this episode, and stay tuned for another episode here of the Trust Exchange podcast series.